Welcome and hello. Oh, I am so looking forward to this. I was over here like continuing to type up notes and thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell them too much. Because I absolutely love what we do in hypnotherapy. I love it because it is such a powerful tool that gets amazing results within the session and after the session. So today I'm going to share with you about how we reprogram the subconscious mind and give you some insights into how hypnotherapy works, why it works, and then I'll share with you what my process looks like. So I have been studying very similar concepts through deep yogic studies. And I used to provide yoga nidra very, very often. And I'm bringing it back because I want people to be able to experience that too. However, I always said that yoga nidra was the original hypnotherapy. And I would always say that. And I was not a hypnotherapist yet. I hadn't really fully started my studies. And when I did, I was like, oh my gosh, I was so right about that. Like it really truly is the original form of hypnotherapy. And today we're going to dive into how you can also use hypnotherapy tactics and tools to begin to notice your patterns and really looking at those limiting beliefs, those negative self talk, and how we can catch that and become more aware because awareness is always the first starting point. Because if you are not aware that you have negative self talk, then you don't really feel like you need to change it. But I want to start with saying if you find yourself hitting blocks and saying, oh, I need to do this, but not doing it, there is a reason why, and that is your subconscious. So let's dive in. I'm going to pull this up and hopefully tech works for me, right? So let's get this to presentation style. All right. We're going to give it just a couple minutes so that we make sure everyone is joining us, making sure this is showing up well. So go ahead and just say hi in the chat if you are tuning in. All right, perfect. So feel free during this session. I'm very hopeful that you will ask questions and start to explore a lot of the hypnotherapy and the subconscious mind. So today we're going to be covering like what's the subconscious, science, techniques, success stories of some examples of people that I've worked with, what results you can expect, and then of course contact information and what my process looks like. So your subconscious mind is actually being formed from the moment you're aware in the womb. And I remember studying this during the program, and I was really kind of like, okay, I can get that to a certain extent. But then when they was like, people might remember memories of being in the womb, I was like, oh, probably not. But that sounds like some Salvador Dali style, which was one of my favorite artists growing up. But sound like some Salvador Dali style, and I was like, and I was really surprised. It was maybe my fifth or 10th client in that they started sharing, like, oh, it's dark and what they were experiencing. And I was like, there's nothing else this could be except for the womb. It was wild. And memories shortly after birth, what they were describing. And I didn't tell them, they didn't tell me, but it was very, very apparent. And in our conversation afterwards, they'd even say, like, it felt like I was just born. It was so wild. And I'm like, okay. And the more those started adding up, it was really quite unique and powerful. Now, your subconscious mind, as I mentioned, it's being formed from the moment you're in the womb. Um, the feelings that your mother is having, and I say these things, we are not blaming our parents for our problems. We're not going to go to mom afterwards and be like, oh, it's your fault. No, our parents were doing the best they could with what they had, and we're not always fully in control of our own emotions either. So if mom had a lot of stress or a lot of fear while she was pregnant, those sensations are being transmitted to the baby, to you. And everything from what mom eats to what mom feels, and not necessarily thinks. The baby can't hear the mom's thoughts, but they feel the feelings. Now, outside of the womb, it's little tiny things. It is little things like, am I being paid attention to? Do I feel taken care of? Am I being told no? Or what am I being shown? Now, as I say that, keep in mind that two identical twins can be in the same exact scenario and process the scenario slightly different. So it's not necessarily what is happening, although that is definitely a factor, but it's also how we in our child mind are rationalizing what is happening and internalizing it. So as we internalize it, those messages are forming our subconscious mind to fit in, stay safe, be accepted, um, and be taken care of. So these things that we're learning as a child, and it's not just as a child, but primarily because your subconscious mind is being formed up till about the age of 7, and some say 9, but of what I've seen and noticed along with my studies, I would say 7 is that age. Now, it starts to get a little bit different, like 6, 7, 8, 9. Those are less impressionable years as up to 5 or 6. Okay. Now, what also makes really big impressions into our subconscious minds are intense feelings. This is how PTSD or traumatic events can also be wired into our subconscious as well, or it could just be a really strong breakup or fear or repeating thought pattern that started to happen and then began to program the subconscious. And this is important to know because that means we can reprogram the subconscious. And that is one of the things that we are doing within the hypnotherapy session. It is therapy during that session is we are looking at those powerful memories and emotions and we are beginning to reframe them, which is what we're going to be talking about more. And your subconscious, there are layers and layers and layers of it. Everything from what you believe about food, when you walk into a room and what you think about a lamp. That's the yogic story that's told. And what you think about this and what you think about these people. And there's just layers and layers that are being factored into your experiences leading up to this point in life. Now, science has some amazing things that it is sharing, and starting to do more studies. And I'm actually going to be working on a clinical trial and facilitating that in this next year. But finding in comparison to traditional talk therapy, and I want to explain to you why that is. Because in traditional talk therapy, and I've done this with clients, they come in and there's not an agenda. There is, I have this problem, and they're just talking, and it's more of a venting, and it's allowing a container for them to come to their own conclusion. And a therapist can ask reflective questions, but they're typically not coaching, teaching, guiding in those type of scenarios in traditional talk therapy. When we get to hypnotherapy, we're coming in with a very specific, I have this thought pattern, this behavior, and I don't want it anymore. And this is the thought pattern or behavior that I want now. So we have to be very specific, and it's allowing the client to take a lot more control of what they want and who they want to be. That alone, like a CBT session, is in itself essentially what that would be. Is where we take a little bit more control, we get a little bit more active, and when we know what we're going towards, we can facilitate the steps in a therapeutic way to get to that. In hypnotherapy, we are doing I don't want to use the word intense, but it's not intense as far as it can trigger crying. It can trigger a lot of emotions, but not in the typical way that we would think of triggering and intense, because that's our conscious mind experiencing it. Versus when you're in a hypnotherapy session, things are surfacing and there isn't this like attachment to them. It's more of this like dream-like state as we proceed through it. And we get into the subconscious and we begin to pick out these thoughts that are controlling this behavior or guiding this behavior, and we pick them out, and we can either reframe them and put them back in, or we can kind of brush them away and let them be elsewhere and say thank you, and then put our new thoughts in. At least that's my how I would imagine. um, so that's why it allows us to get more specific. Now, in the hypnotherapy that I provide, it typically takes one session. I would say 90% of my clients, it has taken one session to get where they want when it's super specific. Now, when we get into something a little bit more broad, like relationships or self relationship, self love, those can be a little bit more layered, and that's where it could take more sessions. But providing hypnotherapy compared to 600 sessions of psychoanalysis, right? That's pretty big comparison to how we can start to make that change. So I have had clients that have been like, okay, this month I want to work on this, and next month I want to work on that, and we just continue to do this deep work. It's a beautiful experience. So knowing how that is working and how it's getting into the mind and how it's reframing our situations and how that process is sped up with hypnotherapy. Now, a little bit about me. I mentioned I've had quite a few clients. I was doing the math as I was preparing for this, and I have had about 100 or a little over 100 clients. And some of those have been repeating clients. And I'm meaning like didn't factor those numbers in. And some of those things have been addiction, has been phobias, it's been weight loss. I've done a lot of weight loss with our relationship to food, and how we want binge eating has been a really popular one. Fertility, I have helped women get pregnant who were doing the IVF and doing all these things, and it wasn't working. And so they came and tried hypnotherapy, and it has worked for them. Confidence, performance has also been another one. So when we get into the business world, our relationships, meaning relationships with exercise, relationships with money, relationships with our partners, relationships with friends, relationships with self, productivity, and how we approach our work and overall success. So I've been providing hypnotherapy like really off the off the gate and going since 2020. I began studying in 2018. And it's been a blast. I mean, it is the reason I came to it was because I was working with clients in sports medicine and personal training, and people who had chronic conditions and illnesses and injuries, and they needed to start doing what they were paying me to tell them to do, but they weren't doing it. And I really started getting into cognitive behavioral change and learning more about habits. And I got very, very fascinated and just kept going down that path, and led me to hypnotherapy. And it's been amazing. There's a difference between someone knowing what they need to do and just not doing it versus someone needing them to show them how to do something. So that's where hypnotherapy started to come in for me. So, some of the things that we do within hypnotherapy that you can also do and work on for yourself is deep relaxation. And this is extremely important. So, deep relaxation, and again, this is where it started in my yoga nidra studies of Herbert Benson, a Harvard professor there that taught in the medical school, came across the relaxation response, and he wrote the book, The Relaxation Response, and talks about how, and this is very common in psychology, that we thought neutral was the opposite of like not great. But really, then positive psychology came around and said, oh, no, there's this whole other realm. Well, Herbert Benson did that before positive psychology. And he started with, if illness and our body's ability to be broken and break down is over on this side, and we keep thinking neutral is the best, what if there's this whole other side? And he learned that there's the relaxation response, this deep, deep relaxation that we can get into that actually allows our body to enter rest and digest. But even more, it enters this healing response and its ability to repair. So my sci-fi brain starts going, so it's like those, those tubes or containers people will get into, and they're in that solution and they're like healing at a rapid speed. Think of deep relaxation like that. So getting into this deep, deep state of relaxation in itself will allow you to heal. Now, I taught this and teach this very, very much in my Magnified Abundance course, talking about how in order to manifest anything in life, and that doesn't have to be a woo-woo word, right? Like in order to make anything happen in life, in order to be really, really focused, in order to make it happen, we cannot be coming from a place of scarcity. Rather, we need to be coming from a place of abundance, and how to get people out of scarcity and into abundance so that we can truly start manifesting and manifesting from a state of abundance rather than lack. Uh, is this deep, deep relaxation. And this is something that I often give my clients leading up to their session, is a recording of a yoga nidra session for them to get into that deep relaxation. 1 hour of yoga nidra is equivalent to 4 hours of regular sleep because of that deep relaxation. And we do that within your hypnotherapy too. So this is something that you could start practicing on your own if you want to start getting into that state. Now, visualization is extremely powerful, but as a hypnotherapist, I've come across a few people who are not very visual, and also having taught meditation for many years too. Not everyone has a very visual sense, and that's okay. In your hypnotherapy, or even in your meditation, or your just self-care practice, it doesn't always have to be a visual, because the visual, the intention is to help you with the feeling. It's all about the feeling. So there is a book, it's called The Secret is Feeling, and his name Neville Goddard. And I have a huge, massive book, that or collection of his, and it's also true to do these visualizations before you go to sleep as well. And he explains that that's where the subconscious mind is in your sleep as well. So having these visualizations, but truly using it to get into the feeling. Now you can tap into any feelings that you've had of what you want to channel. So if we want to be more grateful and we want to be appreciative and we want to have this amazing life that we're just in awe of, then we would practice gratitude now and start to feel grateful for the life we have now and allow that feeling to magnify. If we want to feel productive, then we want to tune into those feelings of the last time we felt productive, or imagining ourselves being very productive, and get into that feeling now in order to create more of it. Affirmations, number 3. All right. Affirmations in telling ourselves what we want to hear. This can be super awkward at first, I won't lie. So as we tell ourselves what we need to hear and we tell ourselves what to do, this is speaking to your subconscious as well. And in order to do that, we also have to catch those negative thoughts. So if you are waking up in the morning and you're like, oh my gosh, I am so tired. I need coffee. I am so tired. Oh my gosh, I can't focus. I'm so tired. What am I saying? I am telling myself to continue to feel that way. So I would then pause, catch those thoughts, and then I would say, I am, and maybe you drink coffee. I am currently not drinking coffee, but if you drink coffee and you're like, I'm going to drink this and it's going to give me focused energy. I am feeling energized. I am feeling focused. I am focused. I am focused and I am getting this done. I'm focused on this and I'm getting this done, because your mind is constantly saying things like that, but it's often in the negative phrase. So in order to fuel into your own evolution, we need to tell ourselves the things that we want to do. And again, that can be awkward at first, but it doesn't have to be. It can be very easy. And you can tell yourself that it can be very, very easy. It's very, very easy to talk to your own mind. And it can be fun to also choose those words and then tell it to yourself. So shifting out of the negative into the positive. We can also do reframing. Reframing is one of my favorite things. When I first started coaching, it was often reframing our life story. And I loved when I found that this is also present within hypnotherapy and how vital, crucial it is for your mindset and for your shifting and your changing. So if you start with listening to the stories that you tell, what stories do you have on repeat? And it's probably pretty easy to catch the stories that your parents or someone close to you is on repeat as well. But noticing those stories that you have on repeat and then catching those and saying, how can I reframe them for the positive? One book that I love, and I also teach, I'm a facilitator of the Warrior Goddess training, and she talks about how she traveled a lot as a child, and she always framed it as she never had any friends because she was never had a stable family life because she was moving all the time, and it had this very negative vibe. But when she reframed it and shifted it to, wow, I had such an amazing life, I got to travel all the time and experience all of these different cultures, and it just really formed me to who I am today, to be this accepting and awareness person. She reframed that story. And I know I've caught myself reframing stories when, my story that I was like, oh, yuck. And then I'll reframe it for the positive to try to impress somebody. These were things I used to do. And I'd be like, oh my gosh, my mom makes me do all these like house things. And I'm always having to restore houses with her. And then when I was in this program, I was like, yeah, I've restored all these historical houses and it was really amazing. And we can just shift that in that perspective. So we do that within the hypnotherapy session as well. Those are extremely important to review how our child mind took that to see as their adult mind says, yeah, that wasn't necessarily that bad, or it wasn't that way. So, success stories. Before we dive into success stories, I want to make sure that if anyone has any questions, so I'm going to pause and let's look and see if anyone has any questions. Is there a story that you tell over and over to yourself? Is there something that you would like to change? Would you like to change how you react or act towards something, how you view or respond to something? Are you wanting to change a mindset against something or to change a habit or a behavior? I'd love to hear those in the chat. I have, because 100 clients over the years, I have several success stories. And so I'd like to dive into that with you all if you're ready to hear how this has changed some people's lives. So if yes, put a thumbs up, a heart, type yes in the comments, and let's get started. All right. So success stories. As I mentioned, I had a lot of weight loss clients. I was actually very fortunate. I had, I would say, a friend now who's a doctor and allowed me to use his facility, and he passed a lot of people on to me. And we had so many people that had binge eating. One lady in particular that comes to mind, she really didn't understand why she was binge eating, but it just kept occurring. And one of the scenarios that we came across was that she had several siblings and them fighting over the food. I feel like that one's pretty common. But then she also had some self-love that was coming into the process as well, and remembering that I believe it was her stepfather's mother, so it was her grandmother by law, was sitting and nagging her and criticizing her as she was watching TV. And then eating became this like way to avoid all of that. And she started to really connect and really re-experience in a very different way. And I say we don't re-experience, we review the memories, and feeling into those and being able to watch those and being able to come in and as an adult enter that scene and tell the grandmother what an adult needed to tell her and tell that child what that child needed to be told, and to begin to reframe. And this is where that quantum physics also comes into play with neuroscience, is we begin to reshape that memory and then play the scenario as how life would have shifted and changed, and all the same things happened, but how her view could shift and change through those. Another lady, she associated her skinniness with a certain type of lifestyle, and she didn't want that lifestyle anymore. And so she was avoiding the skinniness in the process. So we had to reframe how she expected her life to be while she was also skinny. I had a lady who she was having some relationship issues, and she was also like noticing that she wasn't running anymore. And she really wanted to get back to running, but there was also this like shame and disgrace that she was experiencing. And so as we shifted some of that, before I knew it, like she was messaging me like a month later and she was like, yeah, I'm running 7 miles a day. I'm back to my morning runs. And I'm like, wow. It was just amazing how easy that was. Another lady, she told me, she was like, I really didn't feel like it did much. But then all of a sudden we went out to vacation and we're picking things on the menu, and I suddenly noticed how easy it was for me to pick the healthy items and not go, oh, I wish I could have that, but I can't. And, cheating and doing these things on the menu. And she was like, it was just easy. I no longer had a desire to pick the other things. And so that's some of the weight loss stories that come to mind. I've also had people who drink and smoke, and really to that root of why they started smoking in the first place and resolving that, but also really telling the mind, like, I no longer want to do this. This is not keeping me safe anymore. What's going to keep me safe is this. And programming the mind for all the beautiful habits that they're going to have now that they're not, and the new habits that they're going to bring in, and the coping strategies. I've had a couple of men, and drinking tends to be a thing there, and on a few of the cases I've had. And it really comes back to like their father drank, and that was an indicator of being a man, and starting to reframe some of that and the things that they really needed from their father. So as you can see, we get deep. We do get deep. I have tissues all around my office. That crying is extremely welcome. That is part of that releasing process. But to also not feel shameful if you don't cry. I've had people who expected to cry and didn't cry. I've had people that go, wow, I really had no idea it was going to go that deep. And then I've had people laugh and say, that's it? That's what it was? So the reactions and the experiences can be very different. What my process looks like. So of what I was taught to spend 20 minutes and get to know what their problem was, and then to spend 60 to 90 minutes in the session and give them the recording, and that's it. I did that a few times, and I really felt that my people needed a little bit more. And as I also experienced it within some of our exchanges and how I felt and how I experienced it, I put together a process that I felt really, really worked. And I believe my clients think so too. So we'll do that initial consultation, and that's one, to make sure it's a good fit, to make sure that you have a clear idea of what you need. Because if someone is to come in and go, yeah, I want to do hypnotherapy, I'm not really sure what I want to do it for, I just want to experience it. We could, but that process might look a little different. So breaking down what they want to work on and what we're going to talk about first might be something that we go into. And what we do first is that 30 to 45-minute session virtually. And that's where we're talking about all the things that you want life to look like. This is our daydream, our perfect life scenario. As we do that, I'm looking for the specific words that are important to you, so that when I provide that hypnosis at the very end, the reprogramming part that you'll get a recording of, just the end, I need it to be your words and how you want things and how you phrase things. I'll add in my stuff too, but those words are really important so that your mind feels it and takes it in. Now, that 90-minute in-person session, we'll review just for a moment, let you get settled. And I have that in person, although I can do that virtual if you need. But our in-person session, I have this big mat on my office floor. It's like a Japanese mat, and I've got bolsters and blankets, and you get super, super cozy. and we provide the hypnotherapy session. At the very end of that session, maybe the last 10 to 20 minutes, is the reprogramming portion that I record, and you'll get a recording that I edit and make it nice and pretty. And you'll get a copy of that within 48 to 72 hours to listen to for 21 days. Then you have the option of a follow up. Within that 21 days, I am on call for you. If you have anything you want to talk about, if you have anything that comes up, and then to see how you're doing and how it's taking, that is your time for follow up. Now, here's the thing, my work is guaranteed. I had this happen. Someone had a phobia of needles, and they were very young when we did the first session, and it worked really well. And then about 3 years, suddenly it stopped working because a new fear had came up. But I redid that session for her, no strings attached. So letting you know that I do really, really trust this process and trust my work. So it's important for us to say where you are, where you want to be, because sometimes the shifts in the mind have happened so much. When we have a follow up and you tell me what you're having, it's like, that's exactly what you wanted. That's exactly what we talked about. And you're like, oh my gosh, okay, it did work. So sometimes that happens as well. All right. So thinking about that, you might see on the screen, and I can type it there. If you just go to izzynally.com/hypnotherapy, you can schedule your consultation today. That easy. The consultation does not cost anything. It's a free consultation. So if you get on the phone and you're like, I don't know, that's okay. It's no strings attached. Pricing and what to expect. I do work on a sliding scale because I want this to be available to everyone. However, my regular package is $400. Now, again, that comes with a guarantee, and whatever habit you are wanting to end, that will happen in 30 days or less. 30 days or less. So, again, compared to traditional talk therapy, where you could go for years taking your time, you could also spend countless more amounts of money within those years. You can condense that time and you can make it happen with less money than what that will cost. All right. Well, let me know if you have any questions, and I hope to talk to you soon.